Please be seated.
Please be seated. You can't help yourself, can you? So we continue to be in the month, the Getting to Know You month. That's the theme of this month, and we're still in November. And it will become apparent in a moment why Michael's not standing here and introducing this bit. But first, let's pray together. God, great mystery beyond our understanding, God of many names and of none, we give thanks for this community. We give thanks for the love that we find here, for it is love that draws us to this place, love of each other and love of you. Be with us this evening and be with Chris as he reveals more of himself to us. Be in his heart and be in our hearts as we listen to him. We ask this in your holy name. Amen.
Amen.
So, Chris is going to be our guest tonight. There's something about this man who's he's always behind the camera, or he's occasionally comes out and he sings the introduction to communion. So there's a mystique to you. So I'm really looking forward to this. And the reason Michael's not asking the questions is because he values his marriage too much. Because he knows exactly what questions to ask. How are you doing? You all right?
Yeah, I'm good.
Good. Okay. So you probably know the questions anyway. So you probably got them ahead of time. Yes, you did.
I did.
So, Chris, where did you grow up? And do you have any special memories about growing up that you'd like to share with us?
I grew up sort of all over. My father was in the Air Force. I was born in Rutland, in the Midlands, but I lived there for 6 weeks only and moved to Singapore. So for a couple of years I've lived in Cyprus and Singapore and Germany and Australia and various parts in the UK. Stories, I've heard people come up with all these lovely stories, and I struggle to remember positive stories from my past, and even recent past. But I did come up with one. When I lived in Thorney Island, we were living on an RAF base which had been decommissioned, so they'd kind of all left, and the airfield was empty. And the Red Devils came to practice. They used the airfield as their practice strip for the summer. And the Red Devils are the RAF parachute display team.
Sorry, can I just interrupt you?
Yeah.
How old were you at the time?
I was 9.
Okay.
Yeah. So 9 years old. So it was summer holidays, and the Red Devils were practicing, and so every day I started wandering off, and I was watching, and I'd go and see them practicing, because they were playing volleyball, and they were doing exercises, and they do, yeah. Yeah. And then one day they said, come and join us. So I spent the summer sort of training with the Red Devils, which was a huge amount of fun. It was kind of their mascot for the summer, which was just so much fun. And my mum thought it was great fun. Until their final day, I went there and they said, oh, we've got a treat for you. So they strapped a parachute on me and took me up in their plane. And so I can't remember what the plane was, but it had a big hole in the side. It didn't have a door, it just had a big hole in the side. It was very windy. And each man jumped out and did 1 forward roll, and then and opened his parachute. And then the next one did 2 forward rolls and opened his parachute. And each one did more and more forward rolls. And so that was lots of fun, and it was all kind of for my benefit. And I got home and I told my mum, oh, I went up in the plane. All these men jumped out of the plane. They were like, what? So my mum was a little bit perturbed. But, nowadays with health and safety and all that, can you imagine? But anyway, that was my positive story.
Oh. There was something about, you said that you hear the stories that other people have said, and how you struggle to come up with a positive story. And it doesn't say in the questions that it has to be a positive story.
No, but I heard everyone else's was quite nice.
I have to say, I enjoy the less positive stories. And I felt, I guess it must have been, it could have been a struggle, constantly moving and never actually staying still, and as you were growing up.
Yeah, it's interesting actually, because I learned very quickly to make friends very quickly.
Right.
So it's never been a problem for me, because I've had to do it all my life. I get to a new place, and you know, and then everyone else is in the same boat. So, but you know, making friends has never been a problem for me.
But then you have to leave them and move on, and that's
So I have got in the habit of, kind of, once I've gone, you know, like, you don't hear from me.
Yeah. Bye. Yeah.
Bye.
Yeah.
New friends.
Were your family religious as you were growing up, and what was your experience?
My family were not religious. My father went to Sunday school as a boy, and I suspect that was much to just get him out of the house. And my mother, not at all. My grandparents on the Dutch side were not religious at all when they were younger. And my parents decided that if I was to, you know, have any religious sort of affiliation or faith, then that was something that I would acquire in my own time. My only real exposure to any religion growing up was being in the Scouts. So for Easter and Christmas we would do sort of churchy things. It's also where I had my first conflict. Yeah, I was at, I think it was an Easter thing, and there was this sermon where they were talking about doubting and not believing people, you know, of faith who had religious experiences. And the priest asked a couple of young lads to come up. It was a big church, I remember lots of people, and hundreds of people. And asked him to come up to the front, and he had this little bag, this little pouch, and in it, apparently, was miniature purple elephants. And so he showed them to the lad that had gone up, and he said, yes, there were purple elephants there, and they were live. And we were all to believe him, because, well, you know, he'd witnessed it there, and it was right in front of us, and he was a friend of ours, so we should believe him, and we were somehow foolish if we didn't believe the experience of other people. And I've come to, as growing up, I accept everyone's experience, but the kind of that did stick with me for a long time, that somehow I was foolish for not believing, just taking as gospel somebody else's experience and view. So my first clash.
So there was some kind of peer pressure there to believe.
Yeah, and it was kind of, you know, you got a little bit sort of laughed at if you didn't believe what had happened at the altar, which was a bit weird.
So you were singled out and
yeah.
Ooh, yeah. You did say something that kind of, I thought you said you talked about your grandparents on the Dutch side. Do you want to say a bit about that kind of heritage?
Well, no, my mother is Dutch, and. They later on in their life they went to the Dutch Reformed Apostolic Church, so quite sort of high church. I think they have their own set of apostles or something that they've decided who are going to, you know, be, you know, leading us once we've all gone to heaven or whatever. I don't really know an awful lot about it, but yeah. So so my mother is not really religious at all. And my father, not really.
Do you consider yourself a Christian? Tell us about your faith and how it affects your life.
I do not consider myself a Christian. I don't believe in any deity. I would describe myself. I used to say atheist, but you know, nowadays that's come with a lot of baggage. So I would describe myself now as a humanist. I used to say that I was a Christian with a lowercase c, but I avoid, you know, that the people usually say that to imply that I live a Christian life, but I could equally, you know, nowadays I think it's important for me to say, well, I live a good Muslim life and a good Hindu life and a good Buddhist life and a, you know, just a good human life. So I do avoid saying that even that I'm a Christian with a lowercase c, because I think that gives, you know, applies those positive traits to a religion instead of applying them to, you know, how people should just behave.
And I guess that ties into your choice of readings that you picked tonight. They feels like that they very much tie into that.
Yes. So so I've got them here because I don't remember the.
Yeah.
I mean I do know Micah 6:8, partly because I think you use it here a lot, and I think MCC uses it quite a bit. So I was familiar with that reference already. But really, I mean, I just wanted the scriptures to say. Actions speak louder than words.
Yeah.
Don't talk about stuff, just do.
Yeah.
Which I like that. And you know, Micah 6:8, be good, be nice, treat people fairly. And then one actually, which Michael's kind of like referred to me quite a lot, is let your yes be yes and your no be no. Just be a man of your word or a woman of your word. If you say you're going to do something, do it. And I think that's really important. I am aware that all of these are kind of double-edged swords as well, because, you know, once I've committed something, comes hell or high water, I will do that, even if it kind of makes me sick or you know, puts me in bed for the day because I can't get out because I'm miserable or something. But
so it sounds like what you're saying is that once you've said yes, you mean yes, and you will stick to that, and so I'm trustworthy, a man of your word, and that's an important.
Yeah, that's very important to me.
When people used to ask me if I was a Christian, I used to say yes, but not one of those. And also we've heard, you know, Michael's heard quite often that my husband's an atheist, and I kind of it triggers the question, or it prompts the question for me. How is that for? This may be too personal.
How does it work?
Yeah, it's partly how it works, but I suspect that you've answered that already with some of those.
No, actually, really, it's very simple.
Yeah.
Michael and I both believe in love.
Yeah.
Michael calls it God. I call it love. And so, you know, as long as everything comes from a place of love, how you treat people, how you treat the world, how you treat strangers, what you do, how you talk to people, you know, your motivation, and if it comes, you know, if it comes from a God who is love, you know, then I think we believe in the same thing. Michael believes God is love. You know, I believe in love. It's to me, it's a no-brainer. And I do not see the conflict at all. I just don't see it. And it's really, I mean, I understand. I mean, I get the question a huge amount in MCC. People are always asking me, you must argue all the time at home. Like, no, he's always right.
Oh, I'm surprised you didn't come up here and ask
No, it's not true. He's not always right.
I think we all know that. Thank you. I hope that wasn't kind of too probing. What experiences mark your spiritual life? Are important to you, or were turning points in your life?
Again, this is quite difficult because I just don't even describe myself as spiritual. Partly, one of the reasons I don't is to be clear as to who I am because I'm around church people a lot. I work for MCC. You know, I go to conferences. I come to church every week. And I'm an atheist/humanist, so I try and be very clear with my language, and you know, to describe myself as spiritual, I feel like I'm bleeding the edges, and I'm coming into kind of the sort of religion, spiritual thing. But you know, the closest spiritual experiences that I would say I've had are really singing. Singing is my spiritual. That's where I get out of myself.
You have like a transcendent experience.
Yes,
when you sing.
when you know just for all you singers out there. When you know your words and you know the tune and the notes, and it's like talking. It's second nature, and you're not thinking, oh gosh, what's my next word? What's my next note? And then you can just be in the moment, and it's important for me to know and to express that doesn't have to be religious music. I mean, I've sung a lot of jazz in my time, and I love, nothing better than singing with a 6-8 piece jazz band behind you, and just a phenomenal experience and a sharing and supportive and emotional experience, just as much as when I'm singing gospel with Michael for Christmas with Dolores Berry. They are equally spiritual experiences for me, as far as I can see, what spirituality is for me. That's kind of as spiritual as I get.
I guess when you first started saying I don't see myself as spiritual, I reframed the question in my head, and I was going to say, do you want to talk about some of the experiences in your life that have impacted your life in quite a in a big way? And I guess I'm assuming from what you're saying that discovering that you could sing and in the enjoyment of the singing, you could say was one of those. Yeah.
Yes, I think it's difficult really, because there wasn't a moment where I went, oh look, I can sing, and that has impacted my life. I think it was a gradual thing, and slowly I realised that it's important for me to be part of a choir. So it was kind of the first thing we did when we came back to Brighton was I joined the Brighton Gay Men's Chorus. I think something that maybe has impacted my life more than most things is my health, my mental health, and in that for 16 years I was a sort of kind of highly paid, highly sort of charged IT consultant and travelling around North America. And then I had what you might describe as a nervous breakdown. I don't think they use that terminology anymore, but I stopped. I haven't had a job, not a proper job, since. I haven't gone to work for 16 years, 15 years. And I think that has had probably a huge impact on me in just being more aware of my sort of vulnerability and what I'm capable of. I do find that there's something about me that says I'm capable. There's something about me that people assume I know what I'm doing. Chris, will you run a choir? I've never directed a choir. I don't know what I'm doing. I think I've always had that, but I think there's another voice that I carry around with me a lot that says you might not be capable. And then of course coming back to the sort of double-edged sword of once I've said yes, then I'm sleepless nights working out how I'm going to get this to work. So that's experience.
And of course we've had the privilege and the pleasure of experiencing your singing here a lot, and you bring a lot of that to the church, and thank you for that. You certainly appeared like you knew what you were doing in the rehearsal we had before the service tonight. When did you begin coming to MCC, and what brought you to MCC in the first place?
I think you might be able to guess the answer to that one. Michael introduced me, well, not completely introduced me. Danny Gonzalez, who is a mutual friend that we have, kind of introduced me to MCC. Danny was lay delegate? Deacon at MCC New York. And he was also my membership secretary for the New York Metro Bears, the Bear Club in New York. Michael came, so I had been introduced to MCC kind of as sort of a satellite organisation. And then I met Michael when he was on holiday in New York. And I don't think MCC wasn't involved in that first weekend. However, when Michael left, I felt the need to be connected to him, and I thought, well, where's he going to be? And I knew that he was going to be at MCC, so that was my first trip to MCC in New York, was because I knew Michael would be at church. Of course, it's 5 hours difference, so I probably wasn't there at the same time, but technicalities. So that was kind of my introduction to MCC, because that's
you
where
say you're not spiritual.
I said it's about love.
Yeah. Oh.
So yeah, that's my introduction to MCC. That was 17 years ago. I've pretty much been at church every weekend.
You have.
Since then, unless Michael's not here, don't come without him. Yeah, and so now I work for MCC. I sang with the choir in MCC New York, so helped Michael run New Light and set up his church in West Virginia, and yeah.
So it was love that brought you to MCC in the first place. Yeah, and you've of course worked for them ever since. You've had some kind of working. So the next question is, why is MCC important to you? And I think you already answered this. Do I need to be winding it up?
No, MCC important to me. Sorry, I did
No.
MCC is important to me because of what they do in addition to the whole Jesus and God and spirituality thing. If it was just that, I really wouldn't be able to spend so much time with it. But it's important that they reach out to those that are marginalised. The LGBT community primarily it's my focus. When I'm raising funds for a charity, I want it to be a grassroots LGBT organisation. It's what's in my heart. It's what's important to me, and I know that MCC is largely rooted in that, and that's largely what this congregation does. And that does result in a very eclectic mix of people. I know that when we were at New Light, we had a quarter of the population identified as heterosexual, but our message was still very strong about looking after the LGBT community. So that's why and also I got on with the former moderator very well as well. Troy Perry had the hots for me. Wouldn't let me leave his side.
Oh, it's a different kind of love.
Yeah. Yes. From a distance. From a distance.
From a distance. Have you got cue for a song then? Okay, so there's just one question left, which is, what's your favourite Bible story and why? Do you have a favourite Bible story?
I don't really have a favourite Bible story, but my favourite quote is "There is no fear in love," and partly because we used it during the marriage equality campaign in Maryland, and I remember creating a 30-foot banner that we put across the front of the church with a big rainbow flag that said, there is no fear in love. I don't know what the reference is, the scripture reference, but that's kind of, my favourite.
Yeah, there's no fear where God is. Thank you for that, Chris. I'm sorry if I went slightly off-piste with some of the questions.
No, it's good. I enjoyed that.
No, I've really enjoyed talking to you, and thank you for revealing more of yourself to us. More, and thank you.
Thank you.